Hi and welcome back. In this lecture we're talking about understanding HTML with BeautifulSoup. Now that we understand the structure of HTML, we can tell Python how to understand it as well and how to extract some data from it. Because HTML is so structured, always with its opening and closing tags, it's fairly straightforward to get data out of it. And as addition, as part of this lecture, we're also going to install our first library. Because Python doesn't come with any functionality to understand HTML, we need to install a library from the outside in order to do that. There are a lot of Python libraries. It's one of the Python strengths, actually, in order to do all sorts of things. And understanding HTML is one of these. There are other libraries for things like doing web development, data science, showing up windows on your monitor, and things like that. There's loads of libraries, and we're going to install one. In order to install your library, we have to go over to PyCharm and find your preferences. In Mac, it's under PyCharm Community Edition Preferences, and I believe on Windows it's under File, and it's down here somewhere at the bottom. So if you go to your preferences, then you'll be greeted with this window that you may have seen before. And in here, there's one section that's particularly important for installing libraries, and this is your project. In your project, you can choose your project interpreter, and here you'll see the current version of Python that you are running. So as you can see, I'm running 3.6.0 because there's not that many difference between 3.6.0 and 3.6.4, which is the current version. But if you're using 3.7 or something like that, you'll see that here. Then down here, you'll see all the libraries you've got installed. It's possible that this will be empty because you've just started your Python journey and you don't have many things installed, and that's fine. Now, there are other ways of installing libraries other than through PyCharm, and we are going to learn how to use those other ways, but not in this video. We're going to keep it simple for now, and in this section, we'll just stick to installing things through here. Just press the plus icon, and here you can see all of these things are Python libraries you can install. But Python doesn't do any sort of sanitization, so these libraries, you don't really know what they do. I recommend you don't go installing random libraries from here. Make sure you know what you want before you go through this and install anything. And what we want is a library called BeautifulSoup 4. It's this one here. Notice how there are two at the moment, BeautifulSoup 4-slurp and BeautifulSoup 4. We want to install BeautifulSoup 4. Okay. There are others like BeautifulSoup and a bunch of others. Make sure you pick BeautifulSoup 4. This one here is version 3. You don't want to go for that. You want to go for number 4. Okay. And then install it. Because I've already got it installed, my library is blue, as you can see. So I don't need to install it again. But all you have to do is select it and press install, and it should all be fine. You don't need to do anything else. Once that's done, you should see BeautifulSoup appear here like it has for me, and then that means you are ready to use it. Press apply, and then OK. Once you've done that, we can go ahead and look at our first example of understanding HTML using BeautifulSoup. And also we'll look at exactly what BeautifulSoup does and why we want it. So let's create a new Python file, and you can name it, for example, simple_HTML. This simple_HTML is because in this first example, we're going to be looking at some reasonably simple HTML that we can understand with BeautifulSoup. And in the next example, we're going to look at something a bit more complicated. So what does BeautifulSoup do? Well, I'm going to create a variable here, which is my simple HTML, and I've just pasted it in here. And look at how the HTML is structured into its tags. So you can see the HTML tag and the HTML closing tag. And inside this tag, you've got two children, essentially, the head tag and the body tag. The body tag contains a bunch of children, like this H1, this P here, this UL here. The UL contains a bunch of children, which are these LIs. UL, by the way, stands for unordered list. LI stands for list item. We've already looked at H1 for header 1 and P for paragraph. Also notice how one of these paragraphs has a class, subtitle class. What BeautifulSoup can do is it can sort of understand this structure, and it can determine that head is a child of HTML. And it can determine that there are two paragraphs. it can look at the attributes of different elements like the subtitle. And it can also do things like search. So you can tell it, I'm looking for an element that has class subtitle, and it will give you this P tag here. So BeautifulSoup is used for understanding and searching through HTML code. And by the way, just for completeness, HTML is very similar to another language called XML. They look essentially identical with a few minor differences. So BeautifulSoup can also be used for understanding XML, but we are not going to look into that in this video, or indeed in this course. So now that we've got our variable, we have to make sure to include BeautifulSoup into our file, to import it. And imports in Python should generally go at the top of the file. So we're going to do from bs4 import BeautifulSoup. Notice how we're not using BeautifulSoup 4 in any place, we're only using bs4. That's because the BeautifulSoup library has been coded, has been programmed, so that the import happens like this. Other libraries are slightly different. In other libraries, you may do something like from BeautifulSoup 4 import something. But in the case of BeautifulSoup 4, this is incorrect. You must do from bs4 import BeautifulSoup. That's just the way it's coded. It doesn't mean anything specific. And then we're going to give this HTML over to BeautifulSoup for parsing. Parsing is just a programming term for understanding something that has a structure. So I'm going to create a variable called SimpleSoup for our simple HTML. And it's going to be BeautifulSoup. And this is a class, so we're going to instantiate a new object of this class. We're going to create a new object. And the arguments have to be the HTML you want to parse. And as a second argument, you must give it a string of what type of document this is. And this is an HTML document, so we must give it the string html.parser. That way, that tells BeautifulSoup to use the HTML parser in order to understand this document. And then it can understand it. Now, BeautifulSoup is able to go through this document and fully understand it. So we can do things like print SimpleSoup.find h1. Notice how all we're doing is accessing this soup object, the SimpleSoup object, and accessing the find method inside it, and giving it what we want to find as an argument. In this case, what we want to find is this heading 1. Because there's only a single heading 1 in the page, this is going to give us that element. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and run this. And you can see how it gives us the tag that we found. h1, this is the title, and closing h1. If you want to find the contents of the tag as opposed to the entire tag, so only this is a title, you can do that by doing SimpleSoup.find h1. This is the tag that you want to find. And after it, you can do .string. And then it gives you, this is the title. Notice how our h1 tag is this SimpleSoup.find h1. And that is an object which has this property here, string, that you can access. No magic's happening here. This is all exactly as we've seen so far in Python. We're just instantiating new objects of type tag, in this case, and then we're accessing a property of that tag. If we wanted to extract this functionality into a function, we could do that, of course. Oh, deleted one too many things there, or rather many too many things. We could say something like find title, and this could give us this content here. Pep8 asks me to put 2 blank lines before a function definition, and then we can of course do find title here. We don't need to print because that's already printing. When we run that, we get this is a title. Okay. Now another thing we can do is, for example, find the different things in a list. Let's do that now. We're going to do def find list items, and this function is going to print out Rolf, Charlie, Jen, and Jose. So it's going to go and find these list items. BeautifulSoup is going to return them as a list of tags, because there are many of them, and then we're going to get the string contents of each. Okay. So what we're going to do is say list items equal SimpleSoup.find all, and this is going to give us all of the tags if there are many. Find is only going to give you one. So we're going to do find all and then li. And what that's going to do is it's going to give us these list items that we found. Let's print them out just for you to see exactly what's happening. And I'm going to call the function down here as well. And now notice how BeautifulSoup gives us a list of tags. And each tag is the list item and includes inside it Rolf. Now you already know how to extract the string for each of these list items. You can use a list comprehension, for example, to create a new list of the string contents of each tag. You can go and do that right now. I'm sure you managed. All you've got to do is say list contents is e.string, for example, for e in list items. E is the variable we're creating to go over each element in list items, and we're accessing the string property of that and putting that into a new list, which is the list contents. Now, if we print out list contents, you can see that we get a list of the contents: Rolf, Charlie, Jen, and Jose. Okay. Let's now look at something a bit more complicated. Let's look at this paragraph. Let's find the paragraph. Notice how there are two paragraphs, so in order to find it, we're going to have to give BeautifulSoup some information other than we're looking for a paragraph. So what we're going to do is we're going to tell BeautifulSoup we're looking for a paragraph that has a class of subtitle. So we're looking for this one, not this one. Let's do it. We're going to define a new function once again. Find subtitle. And what we're going to do is simply find the paragraph, which is going to be simplesoup.find. And now we're going to give it the p tag that we're looking for. And then notice how the second argument is an ATTRS dictionary. This ATTRS dictionary is the attributes of the tag we are looking for. So that is, if we're looking for something that has a class, we're going to give it a dictionary that represents what we're looking for. So in this case, it's going to be class is subtitle. Okay, then we can print paragraph.string, and it should give us, once we run the function as well, of course, our subtitle there. And there you have it. That's how you can find something that has an attribute so that you can drill down on a specific entity as opposed to a more general tag. If you've got a lot of p tags in your code, in your HTML code, you're going to want to be able to narrow it down using some other attribute. In this case, we're using the class. Notice this HTML is fairly simple, so we need to make sure to learn a bit more about BeautifulSoup if we're going to do something more complicated. Talking about more complicated, let's now find the other paragraph. Notice how BeautifulSoup cannot find a paragraph where the class is not subtitle. But what we can do is find all the paragraphs and then remove the one that has this class. So let's do that. What to do is, say, find other paragraph, for example. And then we're going to look at all the paragraphs. You know how to do this. Simplesoup.findAll p. This is going to give us all the paragraphs in the same way that doing this up here gave us all the list items. And then we're going to do other paragraph is p for p in paragraphs if the subtitle not in p.attrs.get class. And we're going to look at what this gives us and fix it in just a moment. And then we're going to print out the other paragraph, 0.string. So what is happening here? This is not quite going to work, by the way, but we'll fix it in just a moment. We're finding all the paragraphs. Then we're going to put the paragraph in its entirety inside this list while we iterate over the paragraphs we found. But we're only going to do that if the subtitle string is not in the paragraph's attributes. And this .get here is a different way of doing this. So p.attrs, the attributes of p, is a dictionary, as we saw when we tried to access it here. BeautifulSoup likes these attributes as a dictionary. So the attributes is a dictionary, and we can access them using the square bracket notation or using the get method. The get method has a benefit, which is that it doesn't raise a key error if it can't find it. Instead, it returns none. So that's a benefit of the get method. However, it's not quite going to work. Let's run it and find out. And as you can see, we get an error here. And the error is reasonable, but maybe not so obvious if you don't know exactly what's going on in this list comprehension. So it says type error. Argument of type none type is not iterable. Okay. So what is happening exactly? We've got evidently something that is none, and it's telling us none is not iterable, which we can probably agree on because it's not a list or a sequence or anything like that. And it's saying you're trying to iterate over it. When are we trying to iterate? We're not iterating over anything. So there are two options. Paragraphs could be none, and then it's telling you, hey, you can't iterate over paragraphs because it's none. So let's print paragraphs out and see if that's the problem. Let's run it again. You can see that we've printed the paragraphs and we found both paragraphs here. So this is not the problem. When we do for p in paragraphs, Python will be okay with that because we're iterating over paragraphs. Paragraphs is a list, so that's fine. The only other instance we're using in is here, p.attrs.get. And I just said that the get method returns none if it can't find this thing in the dictionary, this class. So we've got two paragraphs. One of them has the class, the other one does not. So for this paragraph, p.attrs.get class is going to be none. And then we're checking subtitle not in none. And what that's doing in the background is it's going over every element and comparing subtitle against each element and saying whether it exists or not. So here we're also doing iteration. Only it's a bit more obfuscated by the Python syntax. But it's doing iteration, and it's saying, hey, p.attrs.get of class is giving you none, and then you're checking whether something is in it, but you can't check whether something is in none because that doesn't make any sense. Fortunately, the get method allows us to do something which is pretty useful. Instead of returning none, which is the default, which is essentially this, we can return something else if we cannot find the thing. So what we're going to do is we're going to return an empty list if we couldn't find the class in this dictionary. That way we're going to check whether the subtitle is not in an empty list instead of none. Let's run this again. Now you can see how we found it. Okay, so it's important that you understand exactly what's going on in your code so you can debug your errors. But if you don't, go and debug. We know how to debug now. Put some print statements, that's also a good way, or indeed use the logging module that we've learned about in order to check it. Now we've looked at some simple HTML parsing in this video. We have looked at individual items like h1, we've looked at multiple items like the list, we've looked at a specific item using the attributes, finding with this dictionary of attributes, and we've also looked at finding all the elements and then removing some by using this p.attrs. Okay, in the next video we're going to look at something a bit more complex, so stay with me and I'll see you there.